Welcome to Almost Live, a deep dive with a shallow host. My name is Bob Perfect, and on the line is Simmi Areff from Known Somebodies, and now POC Podcasts. How you doing, Simmi?
Fine, thank you, Bob. I'm also a comedian, so yeah, I don't know why you didn't introduce that.
Because I'm not interviewing you as a comedian today. I'm
Yeah,
interviewing
but
you as a podcaster.
no. Then my title is artist. Like,
I'm not interviewing you as an artist. I don't want your artistic opinions. I want your professional opinions when it comes to
but my
the
pod,
art of podcasting.
but that's one of my art forms. Is podcasting. I think it was very rude
What
of
is
you
your
just to say.
I
Oh,
think it's very rude of you to start this interview off by trolling me.
well, I was expecting more, even because just before we went live, you're like, shh, shh, shh. I was like, oh, this guy's professional. Wow, what a hero. But then I was just like,
And you're the one with the mic there.
yeah, bro, I am using a microphone because I want to sound banging as fuck.
But you didn't realize that we're on video, and the thing that actually matters is looking good. So
No, it's not. I've read many articles of sources. Like I don't have to refer it to anything. But the reason why you watch YouTube, like when you're watching a video, you're not. Of course, you're watching the video for what the video is to see the stuff. But actually, if the audio is shitty, you won't watch the video.
yeah,
Audio is,
I've read those articles. I've read those articles too. So
yeah. Did you write them? Did you write them? Well, then,
I
maybe you
knew
want
getting you on was going to be a
to.
fun thing to do. Anyway, how you doing, Simmi? Why did you start podcasting?
Um, so I worked at 947. It was a radio station in Joburg, like the equivalent of East Coast, but not. And I was working there and I wanted to be on air, but my program manager at the time didn't want to put me on. And I was doing like a lot of comedy and stuff, and it was tough because I used to do breakfast radio. So I'd wake up early in the morning.
Getting up early.
Yeah, and then still go gig at night, which was tough. Like your body clock.
The breakfast slots is the worst for comedians, like just in terms of what you have to do, because as a comedian, you're up until late night.
Yeah, so he didn't put me on air, and then I was kind of leaning towards just doing stand up anyway. So I left, and then I went to Montreal for the comedy festival, and I saw a live podcast. But by that time, I had already like heard the champs, which like go with Mo Cash and Neil Brennan, and I thought that stuff was amazing.
Oh, cool.
And then I knew how to record audio and edit audio. I decided to do my own podcast, but also in the back of my mind, I was like, yo, if a radio station's always asking for demos. They're like, yo, do you have a demo? Do you have a demo? Do you have a demo? Then I was like, there's no better demo than a podcast. Yeah. So I thought like, it'll just be like a cool CV and I get to interview like my friends and stuff.
So that was the basic premise of the beginning, was just, hey, let me try to do this thing because they're not giving me a chance on radio, and I create something for myself.
Yeah. Part of the premise was also that, like I knew I didn't have access to super famous people. Like I had a couple of celebrities. I use the word obtusely, but I knew that I had enough interesting people. So when I said listen on somebodies, I wanted to speak to people that aren't like massively famous, and to find out like what they're doing and how they do it. So that's the reason why I started Lesson on Somebody's. And now I think it's developed a bit more than that, because the pool of talent is only a certain depth, and you can't get the same amount of guests over and over and over again. So, and like,
does that limit your growth by going for like lesser known somebodies? Because one of the things when people start podcasts is they think, hey, I'm going to invite famous people. And I've seen it's happen pretty recently, like new podcasts are coming up, and they'll be like, cool, let's interview the top 10 musicians, or, the top 10 actors, and like get famous people on, because that's going to get people interested in the podcast and by nature interested in me. So with lesser known somebodies, you're not necessarily doing that. So aren't you kind of like shooting yourself in the foot by having people who aren't as famous?
I think if you're going to use me as an example, I don't think it really pertains to me, because my numbers across the board are the same, whether the person's famous or not, right?
Okay.
I think if you do have a podcast and the best way to get out there is by leveraging of someone else's fame or a platform. So like, it's not something I look down upon. I'm just like, yo, do it as long as the podcast is good. I don't really care who the guest is as long as the podcast is good. So yeah,
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Okay, carry on. Sorry.
No. You can be honest.
Oh, yeah. So I was gonna say, from my point of view, from my side at least, with my podcast and that, what I find is the famous people actually aren't necessarily the ones who do the biggest numbers, because people aren't, like, they already know their story, or they kind of know their story, and like, the famous people retweet 100 things a day. You know, like, they've got 50 different interviews with them.
I don't know if I agree with that. Like when I interviewed Anele's like the biggest broadcaster in the country, one of at least. I think it's your job as the host of the podcast to make it more interesting than like a stock standard interview. I think that's a very thing. And that's why I dig like podcasting more to broadcasting, like radio broadcasting, is because I feel like it's very stock standard on the airwaves. It's like it's the same thing. And I think what podcasting allows you to do, yeah. And I think what podcasting allows you to do is there's no rules to this thing. So you can do it how you want to, ask what you want. And also you have the ability of hindsight, because you can always chop it up the way you want to.
Yeah, because it's not going out live. That is one of the dopest aspects of podcasting. Like, it's like, you say something you don't want, you're going to go, cool, I'm not going to get canceled today.
Yeah. And I think that Anele thing, I mean, I'm also learning from it. I'm by no way like a PhD student or a lecturer in this thing. And I know that I learn a lot, especially now, even when I'm recording now, I learn a lot. I did an interview with Conrad, and it was cool because
I listened to that. Yeah.
I think it was cool because I'd interviewed Conrad before. So I had two different examples of where I am and where I'm going to and how I've done it before. And I think with that one, it's a much more intellectual conversation than the first one, which was like, yo, give me some gags and let's make this thing funny. So I enjoy that. And also it allows me to show people that, you know, like being a comedian doesn't necessarily mean there's a certain level of funny. There could be a deeper sense of intellect.
Although, do you find with your podcast that you have to try and be on? Because I do notice, like, you do perform a little bit, like, to me at least, because like, but you're always kind of performing, so I guess that's just your nature. Yeah. But like, yeah. I do find you are trying to like get gags in and stuff like that, you know, on the podcast, and still make it entertaining.
I think I'm on all the time. I don't think there's a moment where, so like, even if I was like, it also depends on the mood that I'm in, because I'm a moody person generally. I gags into things. That's because that's what my natural intention when we're having a conversation is, to go towards that space. I don't know if I try and make it punchier. I certainly know in my last couple of episodes that isn't the truth. I just try to get a really good, like, try to get a nice storyline developed.
Although the Stuart Goldsmith one, you were pretty on, dude. Like, you were like, that was like the most like Simmi at like, he is hosting a podcast, like, I've heard.
I think with the Stuart Goldsmith one is like, of course it's me being on, but I'm like that all the time. But I think because Stuart is also that person, so he gives a lot more, especially when he's on mic compared to when the microphones are down. And all of those responses were natural responses. It kind of also gassed me up because, you know, like, for me, it was the podcast going full circle. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was actually a really, really, really good episode. And it's funny enough because after that, I just didn't want to do the podcast anymore. I was just like, yo, I mean, you know, it's like sometimes you get to like a goal and you're just like, well, what's the point of doing this thing anymore?
I get that. When you started podcasting, what sort of setup did you use? Because this is something...
You've never gotten it. You don't get it, Bob. What? You don't have that. You don't get it.
It's cool. I'm segueing to the next question now anyway, Simmi, you troll.
Thank you.
What sort of setup did you start with? Because a lot of people, when they want to start podcasting, you know, they worry about that sort of thing. They're like, how do I do this thing? Do I do it like, you know, because you hear you could do it off a cell phone and stuff like that. But when you started, what did you do?
I had a Zoom H4n.
Oh, cool. I've got the H5n. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've got it around here somewhere. It was at that time you could buy a lot of radio stations were using it because it was one of the first recorders you could use where it goes onto the SD card and you can pull the SD card out and put it in your computers very quick. A lot of the field reporters were using it for eyewitness news at the time. And I learned how to use it at a radio station. And then one of my friends has a music store, and her dad has a music store, and I saw them selling it, and it was cheap, bro. It was like 1,200 rand then. So I was like, dope.
That is cheap.
Yeah, because now the price jumped up, and you know why the price jumped up was because it's such a good machine. It's such a good machine.
Yeah, the H4 and the H5 are so good.
Yeah, but specifically H4. The H4 was so good. Like H4 came before H5. It was so good. People use it to this day, but they use it for so many. Like, you laugh, but like I recorded my one-man special, the audio of it on that thing, and I remember the guys from
Mnet. Why would I laugh?
Yeah, like, well, no, I'm saying that, you know, if you've done any recordings, which you haven't, you'd know that the sound setup is is a bit more than just an H4n, but the audio is really, really good. It's high quality stuff. So like I use that, and because it got two XLR points, I just plugged in two microphones, took it wherever I went to. I did like the first 65 podcasts with that. It's very good.
Okay. And now?
Now I use a Rodecaster Pro. I've got it on the floor, so it's a bit difficult to show.
Okay, but you're doing it just before we went on, so troll a little there with.
That was on my phone, but yeah, I
don't have one.
Yeah, I don't have it, but like I can play sound effects. You know, which is,
and you do that whilst you're recording people, so it allows you to actually like live produce the show now.
Yeah, it's a small radio station at a very expensive price, but not the price of a radio station. But that being said, you don't need a Rodecaster Pro to make yourself some good, decent audio. And you know that because, I mean, you use like an H5, but even that, you don't even need that. Like, so the guys that record via their phones, you can get decent audio via a phone, especially if you know how to do it properly. So like if I was interviewing you now and I'm in Joburg, you're in Durban, I would say take your phone out and go to your voice note app, click record, and then I'll do so on my side and then just kind of sync it, and it'll be pretty dope.
Okay, so that's simple, because also like in post, there's lots of like different kinds of apps. I mean, I use Hindenburg, but I know like Audacity, Reaper, Pro Tools, etc. Like, would you say like if people, pardon?
I've only ever used Audacity. Like, I know how to use Adobe because it was at the radio station, but I use Audacity because it was free. I didn't have money to buy Adobe when I started, and now I've become really, really good at Audacity that I only use Audacity.
I like Hindenburg. It's amazing. You should try out the trial sometime. Like, you'll see, but maybe you don't want it. Maybe you don't need it.
I think anybody, they do a podcast and they learn how to edit, because it's also like a learning thing. You're not going to get into this thing and be like, yeah, this is exactly how I do it. And a lot of people don't take the time to do the laundry work of it, you know, like the editing process, the mastering process, making it sound nice, removing, like
learning about compression, learning about the different.
Yeah, people don't take that, or like noise reduction is like a thing like people don't take seriously either. So, I mean, but those are learning things. So I learned about noise reduction like 24 episodes in, you know, so it's not like the only thing here now is me. If it sounds shit, I get upset. Back in the day, if it sounded shit, I would still put it out.
Yeah, I've learned like what audio reduction can actually do, and what it can't do through experience. So, and not the good kind of experience, but that is a large portion of this thing when it comes to podcasting, because like when you started, how long have you been doing this for now? Like 2 or 3 years?
2016, end of 2016.
So there's quite a bit of information out there when you started, but nowhere near as much as there is now.
Yeah, not at all. I think,
and
but also when I started, you must that in like it wasn't a big thing in South Africa. Like it's still from like I debate a lot with my friend Dean, because Dean's in radio, and his
Yeah.
specific mandate is like podcast and digital stuff. And I debate with him a lot about like, everybody's got a podcast, but that doesn't necessarily mean, I say everybody, that there's like a
I was going to
podcast.
ask you about that.
Yeah. Like not
there's that sentiment.
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't classify it as a boom. I think people are dipping their toes into it. I don't think they will have the consistency or the willpower or the longevity to continue to do it. I think it's a nice thing to say that you want to do, especially if you're interested in it. And you kind of get your friends listen to it, but life moves on and then you don't continue doing it. And I think anybody that continues doing it, they'll probably, I mean, they'll get a following of some sort.
But I mean, like, you say that, but like, how long? Because I'm sure there's people out there who've been doing this for like 2 or 3 years, and they're like,
that's not
where
long
are my
enough.
numbers?
It's because maybe sometimes, so you see, like at POC Podcasts, which is the podcast company I started, right? One of the
We're
things,
about to talk about that, but cool. Thanks for introducing it.
no worries. One of the things that we focus on, especially with like our core group of talent and podcasters at the moment, is the podcast itself. So like, there's a lot of brainstorming in a podcast. It's just not like here's a microphone and 2 people speaking. So like with Chabo's one, Son of a Son, there's a specific angle in it, and that's the reason why I love that podcast, is because it's dads speaking to other dads, trying to dismantle the patriarchy and toxic masculinity, you know. And I think that's what makes that podcast successful. So I don't really worry about the numbers on that, because I know that the hook is so good. I know that hook can travel anywhere. It's a matter of time. Aisha's one, Bake the Podcast, is more.
So with that's content. Sorry, 1 second, bro. Like, so with that, would it be content that's eternal, essentially? So like, because some podcasts, obviously they're eternal, but like it's weekly content that's, you know, speaking to current things. Whereas with that, it's more speaking to stuff that people can drop in at any point. In 5 years' time, they can come and listen to episode 1, and it's as fresh as like episode.
And because the hook is solid, the hook is really solid. That hook will be interesting 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It'll be important and stuff like that. So like I always say, like, so like when you talk about like people have podcasts and been doing it for a while, maybe the hook isn't good. Maybe the hook isn't good. And I mean, and it's because we've gone from a stage from a podcast where we just interview people. And like, I think podcasting as a space now is more than just interviewing people. Like, there must be a good hook.
Yeah, it's also like there's what can be done with podcasting in terms of production is getting to like radio drama levels, or not even levels, like above that. You know, it's like people are putting out some podcasts I've heard where the production value is like, it's a TV show that you're just listening to. Like, it's crazy the kind of stuff people can do with podcasting.
Who's doing that? Are they local?
No, like I haven't heard too much local stuff that's like that. Although there are a few decent crime drama ones here that are like pretty well produced, but I'm not really too into it. But I do appreciate, you know, the work that they're putting into it. But what other podcasts are on POC Podcast?
So you got Son of a Son, Bake the Podcast, which is Aisha Baker. She's an influencer, which was an interesting one to do because it's one of the things I always talk about, especially with POC in mind, is the diversity of voices. And I hadn't heard a lot of local female podcasts. So she brings that aspect. And I mean, like, it's a bit of it's stock standard, it's generic as default. It's just her interviewing other women. But I think, like, myself as a man, I go,
that's not a great pitch, bro. Like, you're like, just like the hook's great, and you're like,
the pitch doesn't come down to me because I'm not the one selling it, but it's been sold. Because you have to realize, because don't cut people off, Bob. That's basically what I'm trying to say, is that I, as a man, don't enjoy it. But women love it. I mean, I get emails about that podcast often. And they're like, oh, when's Aisha recording more? We want more of Aisha. So you go like, okay, cool. Maybe because I'm not interested in it, I'm not the target market, but it doesn't mean that it's not tapping the pulse of something that interests other people. So yeah. Then we have Part of the Press, which is with the journalist Feral Haffajee, editor of like Daily Maverick and stuff. and that's like a newsy podcast, but I'm trying to make it more pop culture because I find like a lot of news podcasts are just newsy, but it's
Usually, yeah.
smooth. It's smooth, like it's really, really smooth, and like it's there's a podcast, there's a local podcast called "What's the Crap on WhatsApp." It's done by Volume Africa. It's another podcast company, and I
I've
just
heard
think
that name. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
yeah, I just think it's an amazing piece of content because they can share it via WhatsApp. So that's what we're going to do. Part of the press is that we're going to make it like shareable because it's so short, like 5, 6, 7 minutes,
Okay.
not that. So yeah, so that's what we're going to do with that. But like they all have like they're interesting.
Different
All of
niches.
interesting. Yeah, different niches and different people. I mean, and I think that if I have to go, and I think I can say it, and like it may sound a bit come offish and stuff, but the quality of the POC stuff is of a high level. It's even our remote recordings are higher than like other local podcasting people. And I think that's such a important thing because it makes it easier to listen to. Like you want it in your ear. You don't want it shouting in your ear, soft in your ear. You want it just in your ear. And I think that's important. So that's what we focus on. We definitely focus on the quality. I would love to have more podcasts. So that's why we're running that competition at the moment. Just to find like
Once again, something I was about to bring up, but you're just getting there just before the questions come. So do you want to tell us about this competition that you're running?
Yeah, so if you have a podcast or if you have an idea of a podcast, drop us an email at hello@POCPods, just with like your demo, a short description of what it is, where you want to take it, how you want it to sound like. And we'll get back to you and see if we want to help you produce it. I'm looking for...
What sort of stuff are you looking for?
Okay. A vernacular podcast, straight up. Like something in Zulu or Xhosa. Like that's a definite for me. Like if I see something like that, I'm definitely going to put my money behind it. I'll be like, yo, I want that. Because
so
I'm just
someone watching right now can just start a Zulu podcast and you're gonna buy it from them.
Yeah, straight up. Not even
money. There you go. You just heard.
Not even if someone has like a good idea and it's in Zulu, get a hold of me. I'm keen for that. So I'm gonna do that. I also want to go into some sports stuff. And I'm just looking for more female voices. I've got an excellent sex podcast coming out soon. Open Wide Say Ah, which is with a girl called Leka Lolas. And it's very cool. It's like it's a very cool sex podcast. Very cool.
Okay, so what is the plan then for POC podcast with everything you're saying here? Who are you trying to target with all of this? What are you actually trying to do?
Well, I'm trying to
get podcasts together.
No, well, I'm trying to make sure POC podcast is the home of really good like African storytelling. And then after that, I'm going to sell it to Spotify for $7 million and you'll never see me again.
And then we're going to get all the racist videos coming up online of you just talking.
And they can have that. they can have that. If I make my $7 million and you guys have all the racist videos in the world, take them. You post them up. I won't be on any social media then. I'll be at home. People be like, hey, where's Simmi? Hey, did you see what he said in that video? Yeah, let's phone him. I won't pick up. I'll be rich.
Oh man! So Simmi Areff, you're not the Mark Maron of South Africa. You're more like the Joe Rogan.
I actually read a few articles about that deal, and some people don't.
What do you think of it? Let's get your thoughts as a founder of a podcasting company, as a podcaster.
I think it's absolutely great that those type of deals exist because, like, now you got a bit more hubris when you go into a room with people that want to buy your podcast. Like, it's very like handouty at the moment. Like, someone be like, yo, we've got this great opportunity for your podcast. Let's get it. Let's do like a 70-30 split of whatever money we make. And you're like, we made 20 Rand. I don't want to split that money with anybody. In fact, either you keep all 20 or I keep all 20. So I'm just like, but like.
Speaking of which, we've got Busker in the corner over there. That you're welcome to give us some money if you want. Cool, carry on.
There's no one on here. There's no one watching.
You can't see the numbers. I can see the numbers. We got people. People, if you want to leave a comment, give a question to Simmi Areff so he doesn't believe he's just speaking into the void at the moment. That would help me hear a little bit.
I just clicked on the live comment. There's nothing here. There's no one here. We could have done this via the phone.
We are doing this via the phone.
No, you could have just
my phone.
You could have just WhatsApp called me and be like, yo, I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you. And I would have told you. I would have gladly told you. Now I've set up this whole thing to nobody.
You've set up this whole thing. You got a microphone and you put it into your computer.
Yeah.
And you set up this whole thing. These high quality podcasts from POC Podcasts.
Yes, they're high quality. I don't do things half-heartedly, bro. That's the reason why my podcasts are so good.
Except for your live thing.
What live thing?
Your lighting.
Oh, my lighting. Yeah, it's shit. Sorry, because we've been building my house and I'm in the upstairs area where we're building because I'm rich, Bob. I'm building
so podcasting. Okay, so that's the one last thing I actually wanted to bring up with you is how do you make money for podcasting?
I think, to be really honest, is that I'm lucky. I'm very lucky in it. So I read this Edison report where I think it's under 1% of podcasts worldwide have made money. And I don't want to say that, yo, quit your job today and go out and start a podcast. I've been lucky. So with Aisha's podcast, we knew the people at Satiskin, and they have a very progressive, open mind, marketing team. And their owner, Uncle Nizam, is a very cool guy. So he wasn't really interested in it. He doesn't know who Aisha Baker is from a bar of soap, which is literally his business, bars of soap. And which is wild. I just thought about it now. But his daughters love Aisha as an influencer. So that's why they went into the deal. And then the numbers are massive, compared to other podcasts, more than mine even. And we showed them the numbers and they're like, cool, we want to get another season. So that's sorted us out for 30 episodes for her. Khabo's one son of a son. I was in Japan. With Dean and Khabo and a couple of other friends. We went on holiday last year. And I listened to Khabo's voice when he would speak. And I was like, yo, this is a really cool voice. So while we were on holiday, I was like, yo, have you thought about doing podcasting and stuff? He's like, I've actually have a cool podcast idea. And then he wanted to do just a dad podcast. But Dean, using his brain power, is like, yo, let's angle this podcast to a certain hook and stuff. And then on top of that, with Lesser Known Somebodies, Dean, I've got a good relationship with Dean. Dean works at 947. I used to work at 947. They've got a podcast facility. And we struck a deal there. But I'm saying that these conversations that we're having means that people want to spend money. I mean, I look at a lot of podcasts that are sold or monetized. There's a Discovery one at the moment. There's a few. So I think there's market for it. I think if you know someone that can throw a bit of cash behind it, not a lot of money, because you're not going to get gang guap from this thing.
Yeah.
There's a couple. Yeah.
You're playing the long-term game here.
I don't even know if I'm playing the long. Sorry, my toes. It's so cold here in Joburg. I just moved my foot away from myself, and my toes are frozen. But what I'm saying is that I have to play the long-term game because I know the thing that I want. If someone came to me now and they're like, yo, here's 500,000 Rand, Lesser Known Somebodies, I would say yes, but that's not the number I want to sell at. There's a lot of brands that have put money behind podcasts. F&B, R&B did one called Solutionist Thinking. It's a 4.8 million Rand deal. Very good podcast.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, but they did it on the back of a radio station as well. So it's we're in this gray area where we connected to radio.
Is that the issue that we're facing? Because that's, in terms of the money side of it, it does seem to be connected to radio, to ex-radio personalities, to stuff like Cliff Central, to, it's not necessarily, we think that podcasting, well, not necessarily we think, but people might think that podcasting, is the alternative vibe when it comes to this thing. But the alternative side of it isn't necessarily making the money. It's still the big names.
I think our market is a lot more different to the American market. There you get a gimlet show, reply all, and then you're sorted.
Yeah.
You don't need a radio station. I think there's radio is such a big part of South African culture Like it's more, it's listened to more than people watch television. 70% of people listen to radio every day. Those are big numbers. And we don't, podcasting is very niche over here because it's a higher LSM. You must have a smartphone, access to
Yeah.
internet. So you're looking to close that gap. And I don't think without the help of other broadcasting tools and media companies, I don't know if you will bridge that gap quickly. And I'm also
Okay.
not of the opinion that we shouldn't use radio, or radio shouldn't use podcasting. I think they can work hand in hand fine.
I actually agree with you entirely. I don't know if you saw
Yeah.
this question here. It was
Yeah. So I'll
pardon?
get the question now. I just remember going to like a podcast conference, like there's this thing called Pod Talks or something like that. The Wits University hosted once a month. And I remember there were these this guy and girl from like Tux, and they were talking about radio is dying, and that's why they got into podcasting. But they were really just they couldn't get into radio, and that's why they got into podcasting. Much like my story, but way more angrier. And like radio's dying. And I remember Dean came with me, and Dean was just like, radio isn't dying. Like the numbers are going up. So I was like, so when people was like, oh, radio dead, I'm gonna start a podcast. Don't. Radio is fine with and without you. So let me get to this question. It says, with how important quality is when making a podcast for people starting, would you tell them to start and figure shit out and grow, or rather save up and only start when you have the best equipment? Okay, your last sentence, there's a theory called gas. Do you know what gas is, Bob?
I've got a few different ideas of that. Are we talking about weed? Are we talking about like farting? When are we talking about?
That stands for gear acquiring syndrome. It's where people think like if they can
yes.
if they have the best gear to do so. No, you don't need the best equipment. You need something that can record audio decently. You need to figure out how it records audio decently. And these aren't tips like I can give you because everybody's phone is like different, Like if you have an iPhone, I can tell you go to a quiet room, go underneath your duvet, etc., etc. And then you'd be like, oh, how do I get my guest on? Figure it out. You have to figure this thing out. If you don't know how your thing works, no one is going to care for your product, let alone you, because you don't put the effort in. So you don't need the best equipment. The quality is so important. We've got a couple of submissions for that POC podcast competition now. And I mean, like guys are using Instagram live audio and sending it to me. And I can be honest with you, I'm 30, 40 seconds in and I switch off. So,
but at the same time, they can do the thing where they record it on their phone, but then just spend a little bit of time in post. Like just go cool. Like let's actually try and level this out. Let's try and make everything equalized. Let's try and get everything to like a decent level. So like that's the thing. It's like a little bit of effort and a little bit of production value actually can go a long way.
Google the answers. I was like, Google the answers. Like we use this thing because we're recording a lot of stuff remotely. Squadcast. It's an app. It records the audio both sides. It'll record the audio from your computer and my computer, and then it'll sync it for me. And it's $10 and gives me like 5 hours.
Damn, I didn't know it synced it for you. That's really good because like I know I'm having issues like because I'm recording from both sides, but just like having to get the audio from both sides and then do it myself. So
so I'm just like, so these things work and they're pretty good. Like they're very like the Conrad's interview I did with him was via that. So I mean, like these things exist. Just like Google and find out more. Like I'm consumed with podcasts. I listen to about 8 to 9 podcasts in a day. From the moment
I'm probably the same.
By the time I go to sleep, I listen. I consume every single thing. I've got 3 or 4 different newsletters that I've subscribed to, which gives me podcast information, which gives me news stories, etc., etc. And because I'm in it, and I was like, someone said, well, what happens do you get upset when like big companies go to like a radio station and ask them to commission a podcast? And I'm like, no, I don't, because I know like a radio station is like 3-4 years behind me. So they have to throw money. They have to use money to get to the same level that I'm at. So if you look
I
like,
get what you mean there.
any radio station that makes a podcast will be like, okay, cool. We need to book the studio, which is our studio. We need to get a producer. We need to get a voice. We need to get guests. So they'll need and a technical producer to use the studio. So they are paying these people. So it's like it becomes a very costly experiment. Whereas like me, I'm just like, if someone said, yo, I need 10 episodes by next week, I know how to do this.
You take the roadcaster. Yeah.
I know how to do this thing. I know nothing can bamboozle me. Like the Stuart Goldsmith interview, the reason why I liked it is I flew down to Cape Town that day. I had my equipment. I set up my equipment. I recorded it. I edited it. I flew back home. That's a one-man job. Cost me 1,800 Rand for the flight there and back.
Sweet, and then done deal. You got like a dope podcast forever.
Exactly. Exactly. There's nothing bad about that episode. That episode has done wonders for my podcast. It's really, really good. People enjoy it. It was fun. It was nice. It's exactly what I want the podcast to sound like. So why not waste the money and the experience of doing something like that? So yeah, so there's media stations will always be catch up to podcasts at the moment until they hit it right, and they will hit it right eventually. They have to. It's their job.
And then when they do, is that going to be a negative for us, or is that going to be a positive for us?
Positive. Can only be a positive. Because they can only employ people that actually understand the landscape of it.
Okay. So you think the people with experience, the people who've been doing it for a while, who have knowledge within the actual podcasting space will be brought in?
Yeah, so a while ago, Gagiso Media, which owns like East Coast Radio, Jack Rand and stuff, they had a thing called Jackpod. And they had like, similar to like a POC podcast type of thing, they acquired 7-8 different podcasts with different hosts and stuff like that. And you could use their studios and they'll help you and stuff. But it was run by a lady who was an editor at East Coast Radio, a news editor for like 20 years. So you can't be throwing these... Yeah, you can't be throwing like people like, I'm not using old in a bad sense here. I'm saying like she's old. Yeah. She may not be into podcasts as much as you and I are, or like the youth are, or like younger people. Like maybe her consumption of podcasting is different than ours. And it clearly was, because I mean like her editorial decisions or her suggestions weren't good. Like the one thing that makes podcasting dope is because it's democratized. It's not the standard thing that happens out of your airwaves. So once those people get filtered out, and that's what I'm saying, once radio or big media companies work out what they're meant to do, they'll do it fine. But they will only be able to do that once they actually have people that understand podcasting, which they're not at.
Cool. Well, if people want to get into podcasting, you do have a competition for it. I want you to let people know about it one more time before we sign off here. So what is the deal with the POC podcast competition?
Pitch us your podcast. If it sounds dope, if the idea sounds dope, we'll produce that thing. It's as easy as that.
How do people get a hold of you to do that?
Email us at hello@pocpods.com. Someone will get a hold of you. Sometimes I don't check that email account enough. We've just hired a new person, Shabnam. Shabnam is checking all that stuff out. She'll respond to you. She send the audio to me. I'll listen to that thing. And yeah, so send us like a short little paragraph about what your podcast is about, where you want the podcast to go, how you envision it and stuff. And record us a demo episode and send it through. And you can record your demo episode on anything. I'm not going to give you the tips on that. Like, if you want to do it, you will do it. So, and my door is always open for people that have good podcast ideas. I dig it.
Cool. That's it. That is Simmi Areff from POC Podcast, from Known Somebodies. And he also happens to be a comedian. So thank you very much for your time, Simmi. Where can people find you on the internet?
At Simmi Areff on all social media. That's SIMMI, A for Apple, R for Richard, EFF for the political party. And guys, what I recommend that you do is go and listen to Bob Perfect's podcast, the Almost Perfect podcast, and buy a mug.
I know what you're going to say right now.
And buy a mug.
Oh, you actually... I thought you were gonna diss me. I was like, oh, here it comes. He's gonna say, listen to Bob Perfect's podcast and listen to what not to do, and then go listen to Lesser Known Somebodies and listen to what to do, because that's just who you are. So you shocked me.
Have I conditioned you so badly that you think when I speak about your podcast, I'm about to insult you?
You're just gonna nag me. That's it. Like, I just assume you're just gonna nag me because you want to try to sleep with me.
I'm glad you think that. I'm glad you think that when I open my mouth and I start speaking about your podcast, I'm glad you think nothing good is coming out of my mouth. I'm happy now.
Yeah, because when we listen to your podcast, nothing good comes out of your mouth. And that was almost loud.